Alrighty, so this is going to be our quick and dirty guide for new players to World of Warcraft. When I say new players, I should clarify that this guide is really more directed towards people who have some experience in other MMORPGs, or I suppose just MMOs in general, so that I don't have to explain literally all of the concepts. There's plenty of really in-depth guides out there if you're somebody who's brand new to the genre entirely. So let's get on with it. First thing you're going to want to do, of course, is go to Blizzard's website, which is just battle.net, and create an account. And once you've created an account, you'll want to download the game. You'll download the World of Warcraft client to either Windows or Mac, and that will also download the launcher for you as well so that you can download your games. So it doesn't matter whether you start with a free trial account right here or whether you just go ahead and start with a subscription. The subscription in WoW is just the exact same as Final Fantasy XIV. It's $14.99 a month. And it gets cheaper, you know, if you like kind of bundle your months together, so 3 months, 6 months, etc. But it's $15 a month basically. Like I said, it doesn't matter if you start with a free trial account and upgrade later, or if you just jump right into a subscription. So once you've got your account and you've got the game downloaded, go ahead and launch World of Warcraft, obviously. Once you've got the game up, the first thing that you'll have to decide is which server you're going to play on. I'm making this primarily thinking of US players, North America players. The whole account creating process that I just walked through will also cover you for Oceanic, Latin America, etc. EU has a whole nother website they go to. So you'll pick a server. For new players, definitely recommend picking a high pop server. Obviously, you want to play where there's a lot of people playing and not someplace that's dead. So once you've got your server, whether you've got a free trial account or a regular subscription account, doesn't really matter. The first thing that you're going to want to do once you've gotten logged into the server that you've chosen is create a class trial. So that's the first thing that you're going to want to do immediately, unless you already have extensive knowledge about the game from like a friend or videos or something like that, and you already have a precise idea of which class you want to play. I would highly recommend just starting with the class trials. You can play these class trials for, I believe, 7 days. So the idea is just to pick a class that looks interesting to you. We'll go over some of them just a little bit, just a really, really brief overview, but just pick a class. It doesn't really matter for right now. I'm just going to pick Warrior just to have something to show you guys. We'll just randomize everything because we don't really care. So the idea with the class trial, instead of starting from level 1 immediately, is just to give you an idea of how the class is going to play at max level, since these are level 110 class trial characters, and they will have basically their entire toolkit, the same kind of spells and abilities and talents and everything that you'll have at max level. So again, I would highly recommend just creating these class trial characters for every single class that you find even remotely interesting. It only takes a couple of minutes. As you can see, you get ported into the ship. The game's going to want to take you through this whole like brand new tutorial. You can do it if you want to. I don't really recommend it. I would say just open your bags and use your Hearthstone, and that will take you to your main faction city. The reason that I so highly recommend doing the class trial characters is, again, creating a character from level 1, you're only going to have a couple of abilities. You won't have any idea really what the class is going to play like at max level. It's not indicative at all of what the class feels like at max level. So create a class trial for everything, like I said, that you find interesting, and once you've hearthed out, like I just did, you'll want to go to where the training dummies are in your faction city. For the Alliance, they're... I always go the wrong way here. For the Alliance, they're over in the... whatever the heck the little town is called next to the auction house. Doesn't really matter. The big thing is to just get out of the tutorial thing that the game wants to stick you in, because I don't find it very helpful or informative. I've never known a player that's found it helpful or informative, so I would say just skip that altogether and come to where the training dummies are, and at that point you can go through and look at all the different specs that the class has available. You can play around with the different talent options. You can get all of your spells from your spell book, drag them to your action bars, and just start giving yourself an idea of how the class plays, like right here on the training dummies, and this will be a far better representation of what the classes are going to be like than the tutorial thing. So this is what I recommend. You can even run like some dungeons and stuff with the class trial characters. You can go do like quests and things like that, so you can actually really play around with them quite a lot and get an idea of how they play at max level. So once you're done with that, you've done your class trials for all of the characters that look interesting to you, and you've decided on a class that you want to play. Once you're done with all of that and you've got your class in mind, the next thing that you're going to want to do is download add-ons. Add-ons in World of Warcraft are really, really, really important. I know Final Fantasy XIV and ESO both have a lot of add-ons that you can use. Final Fantasy XIV, last time I played anyways, didn't have like specific kind of damage add-ons and stuff. That's something that's really big in WoW, so it's just something that I recommend to every new player, because almost every player in World of Warcraft uses them, and they're far more informative than the base UI. So I'm going to go through really quickly. Oh, by the way, you get add-ons from Twitch. You'll want to go to Twitch and just download the desktop version of Twitch, and then once you've got that on your desktop, you'll go to mods, and you'll click on World of Warcraft once you obviously have it installed on your computer. You'll go to get more add-ons, and you'll just type in the name of the add-ons that you want to look. Otherwise, you can just like pick them from a list right here. As you can see, there's a lot of add-ons. So we're just going to start with some really basic ones for your UI to like change your action bar layouts and how everything looks. The really popular ones are dominoes right here. So as you can see, each of the add-ons has this little install button right here. So I already have dominoes installed, that's why it's not showing it, but you would just click the install button and it uploads the game files automatically onto your computer. So this is dominoes. The other popular one is LVUI for UI, again for action bars and stuff like that. LVUI is really popular. LVUI I would say is more customizable and has more options. Because of that though, it can also be sort of complex and overwhelming for some players. So if it's not something you're like you need like a ton of customization or whatever, I would say just start with dominoes because it's a lot simpler to navigate. Outside of your UI, you'll probably want some party frames, some unit frames, like for your character frames and things like that. So a really popular one is shadow unit frames, and I'm not going to go through like every single add-on that it would help if I didn't have caps on. I'm not going to go through like every single add-on that everybody uses. I'm just going to go through like the really popular ones. So shadow unit frames, you can see I already have the add-on. Again, you'll just hit install and it will automatically download everything that you need to your game client. So this is again for your unit frames. I'll show you guys what these all look like in game in just a minute. So you've got your unit frames, you've got your UI for your action bars and things like that. The next thing that you'll want to download, if you plan on playing a healer, you'll want to download a healer add-on to help you heal your party members. Voodoo is really popular right now. There's a bunch of other ones, but Voodoo is what a lot of people seem to be using. Otherwise, you can do mouse over macros. That's what I do. I'll show you guys some of that a little bit later. And then if you plan on getting into in-game stuff like raiding or Mythic Plus Dungeons or PvP, you'll want to download some of those add-ons. Regardless of what you're doing, you're probably going to want some sort of damage meter or healing meter, and by far the best and most popular is Details. This is so in-depth and so informative. It shows you so much more than just damage. It shows you like who in your party is interrupting spellcasts and who's taking a bunch of damage from mechanics. You can get an idea of who understands the fights, things like that. Also show you healing meters so that you understand what your healing output is and if you're overhealing at all. It's just really informative. I will say it's a very heavy add-on in terms of memory usage, so just keep that in mind. I'll give you guys just a couple of like really quick shout outs for add-ons that are popular for the big kind of areas of the game. So for raiding, you're going to want DBM, Deadly Boss Mods, or you're going to want Exorcist raid tools right here. These are add-ons for raiding. They basically show you raid mechanics. They give you like giant countdowns and stuff that will like pop up in the middle of your screen so that you'll know when mechanics are coming and give you warnings and things like that. They're really, really helpful add-ons. So that's for raiding. For Mythic Plus, if you're planning on really getting into that, there's nothing better than Raider.io. This will show you the Mythic Plus score, basically, of anybody that you're grouped with for Mythic Plus, what their highest keys are, what dungeons, all this other kind of stuff. It's very in-depth. I'm not going to go into it a lot, just so you guys know. For Mythic Plus, you want to get Raider.io. If you're looking for PvP, specifically like competitive 3v3 arenas, a really big one is Arena Team Tracker. We're going to be like this. Arena Team Tracker right here. Again, this will just show your party cooldowns, your trinket usage. It will show enemy trinket usage. Very helpful information for when you're in arenas. Some of this might sound foreign to you guys, but you'll understand once you get in the game and start playing around. So those are the kind of really, really basic add-ons that I just wanted to shout out because, like I said, they're used by a ton of people, and you're going to feel like a little left out if you're the only person that doesn't have them. So after you've got your add-ons installed and set up in the game, you've chosen your server and the character that you want to play. The next thing that you'll want to do is go into the game on your character and get your keybinds set up. Keybinds are really big in World of Warcraft. Please don't be a keyboard turner. It's not cool. It's very inefficient. So for keybinds, let me just give you guys a real quick idea here. By the way, this is what the base UI looks like, just so you guys know. This is World of Warcraft's base UI. Actually, the unit frames are normally way the heck up here. Very not helpful. So this is what the base action bars look like, where everything is normally positioned at. But I'm just hopping on this character to show you keybinds. So for setting your keybinds, you can see just a little bit how I've got some of my keybinds set up. Doesn't matter, choose whatever is most comfortable for you. But for keybinds, you'll just hit escape, or you can hit this red question mark way over here, but just hit escape, and it will take you to the game's menu. Here you can set your keybinds right here, and it will be your keybinds for all of your action buttons and different things. You can pretty much set a keybind for basically everything. So that's that. While you're setting with your keybinds, you'll also want to mess around with the UI options a little bit, like things like auto loot, how many of the action bars you want to display if you want to remove these completely, which I don't recommend, by the way. And then raid profiles, and there's a bunch of different things for you to mess with, and you guys kind of mess around with that in your time and just sort of see what your options are. But I did want to mention keybinds because it's very important, and yeah, keyboard turners are not really looked on very kindly. So get your keybinds set up if it's not something you're used to. I don't know what kind of game you're playing where you don't use keybinds. I guess in Final Fantasy XIV you could be a keybinder, but I think they prioritize keybinds as well in that game. So anyways, that's that. I'm going to go log over to my other server and just give you guys a very brief idea of some of the classes. I'm not going to go through every single class. You guys can make those 110 class trials that I was showing you earlier to get an idea of what looks interesting to you and play around with it to your heart's content. I'm just going to go through what are sort of really good specs right now, and what are going to be really good specs coming in Shadowlands from what we know anyways. And also I'll go through a little bit classes that are most often recommended for newer players. So also for people who are like really new, I would say make sure that you're always setting your Hearthstone to whatever kind of local in the area that you're questing in while you're questing and leveling up. You don't have to worry about this when you're max level, because you'll be setting your Hearthstone to wherever the max level kind of end game zone is. But while you're leveling up, finding the in the area that you're leveling in and setting your quest there can be very helpful for questing very quickly and not having to run all the way back to town all the time. So just so you know. All that. So this is what the UI looks like when you actually have dominoes up. You see how much different it is. Just looks a little more clean. I can put like my really important abilities right here front and center. Dominoes is really great because you can customize everything about your action bars. You can make everything really ginormous if you want. You can make it really tiny. You can hide it completely. I like it because it's customizable enough without being completely overwhelming. So that's just an idea of what the UI looks like with some of the add-ons on. This isn't even all the add-ons. So we're going to go over just a couple of classes. Classes that are most often recommended are the monk, the druid, and the paladin. The reason that these classes are so often recommended is because they are the only 3 classes in the game that are Trinity hybrids, meaning that they have all 3 roles available to the class. So they can tank and heal and DPS. Most other classes just do 2 of the roles, and a lot of the classes are only DPSers. So the monk, the paladin, and the druid are unique in that way that they can play all 3 roles within one class. These are recommended to new players, of course, because it gives you a lot of variety to try new things and learn and grow without feeling stuck or pigeonholed into one role that maybe you start feeling a little overwhelmed in. So you could be super safe and play a druid and go for like the caster DPS spec, which is balance. And then as you start feeling more comfortable in the game, you can switch over to the restoration healing spec of druid and try some dungeons or just some really casual content on that. And if it's, you know, scary or whatever, you can always switch back to a DPS spec. So these are the classes that are most recommended for new players for that reason. They just offer a lot of versatility. As for the classes going into Shadowlands that look really strong right now, basically Resto Druid is, just because of their toolkit, is sort of the king of Mythic Plus right now. They do healing over time. A lot of their heals are instant cast, and they're also able to put out a pretty significant amount of damage while also bringing a ton of utilities. They just sort of have everything. The trade-off is that while they're always sought after in raids, they're not the best raid healer, and they can be a little hit or miss in other areas of content as well. They're usually pretty good in arenas, to be fair, but not always. So Resto Druids. Yeah, so the idea is you have all these healing over time effects that you can put on your party members and just sort of get them like hotted up, really blanket everybody in a bunch of hots. And then once you've done that, you can go into cat form and deal, like I said, pretty good damage considering that you're a healer. This is especially powerful, like I was saying, in Mythic Plus, since they're only 5-man groups. Every person's damage is then considerably more important because there's only 5 people. So having a healer that can blanket everybody in healing over time effects and then get into damage is very important. Plus, like I said, they have a lot of utility. They have knockback effects. They have these like vortexes where you can pull enemies back in. They have roots. They have battle res. They're the only healer in the game with a battle res, so you can resurrect dead allies in combat. Yeah, just really good. You can switch in and out of different forms. Druids are the shapeshifter class, so you can go into bear form to tank like a big hit as a healer, and the bear form will give you extra armor and HP. So it's sort of like a defensive cooldown without having to use one of your actual defensive cooldowns, which is nice. Anyways, that's an overview of what makes Resto Druid so good in Mythic Plus and why it will continue to be good in Mythic Plus come Shadowlands. And they'll also probably still always be pretty decent in PvP as well, 3v3 arena specifically. Outside of that, the Blood Death Knight tank spec is looking really good for Shadowlands as well. The tank specs are something that's a little more flexible. I feel like they get buffed and nerfed with patch cycles, as you might imagine a lot of classes do in a lot of games. But for right now, everything we know from beta for Shadowlands is that Blood Death Knights are looking really powerful. They'll be good in raids, they'll be good in Mythic Plus, and nobody plays tanks in PvP, so that's not really applicable. So the Blood Death Knights sort of tanking kit, just to go over it really quickly, is basically healing up the damage that they take rather than mitigating the damage that they're about to take. So they're not really mitigators so much. I suppose they have sort of some mitigation. You can see right here I have some bone shield stacks that increases my armor. The haste is really what you care about though, as Blood Death Knight. But it's mostly healing it up with Death Strike. So your Death Strikes cost runic power, which is your resource. So when you're fighting in a dungeon or raid, you're just kind of using abilities that are going to generate your runic power and then sort of saving up a little bit for when you take a big hit, and then you can immediately heal it all back with Death Strike. They're very, very powerful healer tanks. Very often they will out heal the actual healer in the group. So yeah, if you're looking for a class that's very, very solo capable, can do a lot of content on their own, very independent, you don't need your healer to babysit you, then Blood Death Knight is probably going to be for you. They don't have the most damage out of all the tanks, which is a little bit of a downside, especially like I said in 5-mans where damage really matters, but the fact that the healer doesn't babysit them means that the healer gets to contribute more damage than they might otherwise be able to. So they also bring a lot of utility with grips where they can grip enemies. So if there's like some stubborn caster sitting way over here, you can grip them. It's obviously not going to work on dummies, but that's fine. So yeah, they have grips, they have mass grips, they have stuns, they have anti-magic shell, which helps them absorb magic damage, and in Shadowlands we'll be getting anti-magic zone, which is basically this ability, this green bubble, but for your whole group. And they also have a battle res in Ray's Ally. So again, they're the only tank in the game. Resto is the only druid, or the only class I should say, that has battle res, and Death Knights are the only class, DPS and tank spec, that have a battle res as well. So those are some of the reasons that they're really powerful tanks, and they're looking really, really good in Shadowlands. They've been buffed a little bit, and Prot Warrior, the former king, has been brought down. So Death Knight's time to shine. Anyway, so that's just a quick overview. The Death Knight also has 2 damage dealing specs that are both melee, if you guys are interested in that. Usually one of them is really good, sort of kind of goes with the tides, I suppose, which one it is. Unholy is more of a damage over time spec, and then Frost is more of a bursty, spammy kind of class. So I'm not going to get into those. Like I said, you guys can play with that in your class trial characters. Next, that's looking really good. I guess I can go over Resto Shamans really quick. Resto Shamans are always sought after in raids as healing classes. The same with Discipline Priests, which we'll go over just a little bit. Resto Shamans primarily are powerful because of their healing cooldowns for the raid. That's basically all there is to it. Their healing outside of their cooldowns isn't really spectacular. They have some pretty decent AoE healing with like Chain Heal, where they can heal a lot of people. Their Healing Rain they can put down in the ground and heal a lot of people. Outside of that, they're just sort of your bog standard healer. What makes them so good, like I said, is their raid cooldowns. So Healing Tide Totem is a 3-minute cooldown. You put down this totem and it heals a pretty decent sized group of people for quite a lot. And then the biggest one is Spirit Link Totem, which sort of redistributes the health of everybody who's inside of the ring. So this is really powerful in raids, especially because tanks or maybe different raid members will get hit by a very hard-hitting mechanic and they're very, very low, or there's going to be a mechanic that's going to do a crap ton of damage to the whole raid. You can drop down the Spirit Link Totem and it just redistributes everybody's health so that nobody's getting one shot. It's extraordinarily powerful. They also bring Heroism or Bloodlust, whatever you want to call it. This is a raid or party-wide buff that gives everybody a ridiculous amount of haste. So that's the Resto Shaman. Just a really quick look. I'm not going to go into the DPS specs for Shaman because frankly they're not that great. Warlock is looking pretty decent. As a damage dealer, this is just a straight damage spec. I'm not really going to get into this. You guys can feel free to play it out on your class trial character. Basically, the thing to know about Warlocks is that they are caster classes that have a pet. As you can see, the pet brings some utility. Depending on the pet that you have out, the utility kind of changes a little bit. Primarily they're so good because they do bring some decent raid utility with a gateway type thing that party members can take to sort of travel across a room very quickly. They bring health stones, which can heal party members in the middle of the fight, and they bring basically a battle res as well. They also deal pretty decent damage. All 3 of the specs usually are pretty decent damage. However, it's Affliction and Destruction Warlock that is usually most highly sought after just because of their damage profiles. So I'm not going to get into it and show you guys what the spec looks like, because I want this to be forever long. Mage is another class, pure damage class that's looking good. Frost Mage right now is looking the best. Frost Mage is pretty much always good in PvP. If you get into PvP, you'll hear a lot of memes about Frost Mage and Rogues always being this sort of eternal pairing. Frost Mage is really good because of their slows. All of their damaging abilities are Frost Magic, and all of their Frost Magic abilities slow enemies. So this is really good in PvP to kite melee characters away from you. It's really good in Mythic Plus to kite the mobs away from the tank, so the tank can kite, I guess. Their damage is usually pretty good. Right now in Shadowlands, on the beta anyways, it's looking very good. Who knows whether that will be tuned before the expansion comes out in 3 weeks, but Mage also brings Heroism or Bloodlust, which again is that raid-wide haste buff. So yeah, outside of that, what makes mages so good in raids, and every raid team that's serious anyways is going to want at least one mage, probably a couple of mages outside of their damage, and their heroism is their ice block, which is the only ability in the game that offers a complete 100% immunity outside of paladin bubble. So yeah, they can soak some pretty dangerous raid mechanics by themselves and just ice block it off since they're not taking any damage. Then you have the disc priest. I'll show you guys just a little bit since it can be a little complicated to explain. I guess Disc Priest is a really powerful raid healer. They're also pretty good in arenas. You're hardly ever going to see Disc Priests in, or really any kind of priests for that matter, in Mythic Plus because they're so squishy. But for 3v3 arenas and raids, they're very good. What makes Disc Priest so unique is the way that they use their healing toolkit, which is their shields. So you give your party and raid members this shield, Power Word Shield. The absorption is pretty decent and it scales as you get like more stats and things like that. But primarily what's so good about it is that once you have shields on people, you can start doing damage to the boss, and the damage that you deal will heal allies that have the shield debuff on them. So they're the only healing priest the only healing class that heals this way, healing through doing damage. It can be pretty fun to play. They have some pretty decent cooldowns. It's not really anything to write home about. Mostly the raid cooldown that everybody likes is the Power Word Barrier, which is basically a huge AoE shield that shields many people all at once and gives them an absorption and a damage reduction. So that's pretty much it for Disc Priest, so what makes them so special. Moving on. We'll go over just a couple more classes that are looking pretty good for Shadowlands, just so you guys have an idea, but I'm not gonna like hop on and show you guys. You guys can play with them in your class trial. So Havoc Demon Hunter, newest class in the game. Looks really good in Shadowlands, just like it's been since it came out in Legion. It just does a crap ton of damage and has pretty decent utility, along with having very, very, very high mobility. That pretty much sums up the Demon Hunter, frankly. Then we have the Hunter. Beastmaster is looking best right now in Shadowlands, but Marksman is also quite strong. Beastmaster has a little more utility. The only difference between Beastmaster and Marksman is Beastmaster has more damage contributed from their pets than Marksman does, and Beastmaster also has a little bit more utility because of that. The third Hunter spec is Survival, which nobody plays except for in arenas because it is melee instead of ranged. And that will be it for the class overview for right now. Like I said, I just wanted to give you guys a couple of like quick ideas, I suppose, on what's looking good and what's looking strong, and then you guys can decide to try some of those in your class trial characters. Outside of that, I suppose one other thing that we'll talk about real quick is sort of the auction house, the game economy, how to make gold, things like that. I'm not going to go super in depth with this. I just want to give you guys a really, really quick general idea of how to do this stuff. So each of the faction capital cities, Stormwind for Alliance and Orgrimmar for the Horde, will have auction houses in them as well as a bunch of other cities, but we'll just start with those two notably. So the auction house basically works like this. You click on the sell button right here and you drag stuff from your bags and you put it in the auction house. So say I want to sell this Frostweave, I can just right click on it. It will put my whole stack over there. It will already tell me what the going price is. So all I have to do is hit create auction and it will list it up. And once it sells, you'll get a envelope icon right here in your mini map that will let you know to go check your mail because you'll have gold waiting for you. So it's just that simple to use the auction house. I will say, since I see a lot of new players doing this, people are not going to buy your junk, like your stuff that you find leveling up or whatever. Any kind of crafting materials that you gather while you're leveling, any like weird green gear, leveling stuff like that, people are just not probably going to be very interested in. Some things of note that will sell well on the auction house are always the end game crafting materials. So when Shadowlands comes out, whatever the Shadowlands ore is, whatever the Shadowlands herbs are, the cloth, all that kind of stuff in Shadowlands is all going to be stuff that if you want to make a crap ton of gold, you'll just farm that stuff in the first couple weeks of the expansion and put it all in the auction house. And you'll be rich because everybody's going to want it because it's the beginning of an expansion. Outside of that, I guess things like battle pets, mounts, high level, like BOE gear and stuff like that will always sell well on the auction house. Outside of that, professions in the game are notoriously very simple. This is not Final Fantasy 14. This is not ESO, where this is like some super in-depth kind of crafting system going on here. It's very, very basic. It's very rudimentary. You go and gather the materials that you need to make something, and then you just click on the item and you craft it, and that's it. Hardly any profession stuff sells well because of that, because it's just so easy to make stuff. However, once again, especially at the beginning of an expansion, tailors who can make whatever the biggest bag is will always make a crap ton of gold. Enchanters who can make weapon enchants especially will always make a crap ton of gold. Jewel crafters who can make gems will always make a crap ton of gold. And alchemists who can make damage potions and things like that will always make a crap ton of gold. So that's that. Outside of that, we'll go over a couple of quick tips for finding groups and getting into some of the group content in the game. So World of Warcraft, as I'm sure everybody knows because of all the memes, is, you know, pug life, so easy lol, whatever. So if you want to join a random heroic dungeon, which gives really crappy rewards that you will outgear 3 weeks into the expansion, this is how you do it. You just click on this little green ball down here. Looks like a green eyeball. And you pick whichever role you want to play the dungeon as. So if you want to tank the dungeon, then you would check that and not these two. If you don't want to tank but you want to heal, and if you just want to do damage, then you do that. Damage queues, of course, are always going to be much longer than healer or tank queues. We also have LFR for raiding. I don't really know why we would ever actually call this raiding, because it's LFR. It's a hot mess. Nobody knows what they're doing until the very end of the expansion when you don't need the gear from it anymore. Pre-made groups is where you should be, in my opinion, especially if you're coming from another MMORPG and you have like some experience. You can find pre-made groups for your Mythic Plus dungeons here. So you'll see people posting groups looking for, you know, keys that they need to get done for their Mythic Plus dungeons. This is also where you can go for raids if you want to pug a normal or a heroic, stuff like that. This is where you would go to find groups that are looking for pugs for raids. And this is like highly recommended over joining LFR, frankly. This is also the same place that you go for PvP. So if you want to queue for a random battleground, as you can see, you can do one of the smaller battlegrounds, one of the bigger epic battlegrounds, that's 40v40. You can do arena skirmishes, things like that, all from this tab right here, and you just hit join battle. Also pre-made groups for PvP, so looking for arenas. Again, you can see everybody's just listing here what they're looking for. You can see what kind of specs everybody's playing. If they have specific notes they want to make, like this guy, you know, whatever, all that kind of stuff. Also for rated arena stuff right here. So that's all of the pre-made group stuff. I highly recommend, especially when you first join the game, to try and find a guild, even if to start with it's just a social guild and not like some serious progression guild. It's still helpful to have that resource and that community of people that can help answer questions for you and do stuff with you. Despite popular opinion, most players in World of Warcraft are, in an almost nerdy way, sort of overjoyed to meet a brand new player to the game. You really only see the sort of toxicity memes about new players if you're going into a dungeon and you don't know what the hell you're doing because you're new, and you don't tell anybody that you're new and you just fuck everything up. People are going to get pretty impatient by that. But if you just say right from the get-go upon joining a dungeon or something that you're a new player, most people are really, 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 really helpful. So yeah, this is how you find a guild. You just go to Guild Finder. You type in your role. You can just hit search and kind of scroll through and see different guilds that, you know, are posting for recruiting or whatever. Another place to look would be on the World of Warcraft forums back at battle.net. You can join the forums there and look for guilds that are looking there. Also, if you don't want to join a guild and you want to look for something a little more casual, you can join a community, I suppose. I would still recommend joining a guild. There's just something tight-knit about it. While we're on the topic of guilds, please know that Discord is very, very big in World of Warcraft. Everybody uses Discord. Like, most people are in Discord all day long while they're playing. So just keep that in mind. Discord is also a great resource for new players, since there will be class Discords. So there will be a Discord channel specifically just for the priest class and just for the monk class and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a great way to just learn about your class and find other people who you can ask questions about if there's something you're stuck on. So yeah, I think that's pretty much going to be what we're going to cover for today. I did just want this to be really quick and just giving a few pointers. I'll make another video in the coming week that will go more into some of the classes and specs, and just really basic information about how to play them so that you're not going in completely blind. But if you guys make the class trials like I suggested, I'm sure you'll figure it out. There's also a ton of guides on YouTube for more in-depth kind of information about classes and things like that. So that's where we'll leave this for today. If you guys have any questions or comments or requests, feel free to leave it in the comments below, and I'll see you guys next time.